Hi, and welcome back to Hot Off the Press, the show about new releases and the authors that bring them to you. I'm your host, Jim Nettles. And so let's see who is coming in to stack up those to be read piles. So, Michael, you are up first.
All righty. So, hello, I'm Michael J. Allen, Star-Lord, Crackpot, and USA Today best-selling author of character-driven, multi-layer, full-spectrum science fiction and fantasy, also currently understudy as one of the three blind mice.
Rachel?
I am Rachel Brune, and I am a speculative fiction author. I'm also the founder and chief editor at Crone Girls Press, which is an indie horror micro press. And I am also the senior editor for the new Falstaff Books horror imprint, Falstaff Dread.
And Shane.
I am Shane K. Morton. I am a very confused human being. I write LGBT fiction, romance, YA, and some drag queen cozy mysteries.
So let's start a little bit into the new releases. I know a couple of you guys have got multiple, so we're going to be stacking up those new Kindles that everybody's about to have. So, Michael, why don't we talk a little bit about the new stories you've got coming out?
Okay. So, we just released Crossways, the first book in the Wayman Chronicles, which is a Sam Bridger story. But leading up into that, we actually released two novellas, one in the Sleigh Bells Ring anthology and one in It Came from the Trailer Park 2, both of which are actually lead-up stories into the main novel.
So give us a little bit of an idea about kind of the universe you're writing in, kind of what people can see, expect it's going to be coming.
Okay, so Crossways, in Crossways, the fate of 11 universes rests in the hands of a hapless trucker that can't read a map. It's basically Big Trouble in Little China in a Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy style universe.
So, Rachel, how about you? What are you bringing with this new horror release? What bodies are we putting in the ground this time?
So it's actually not a horror. It is speculative fiction, contemporary fantasy, and Cold Run is a story about a gentleman named Rick Keller, who is a werewolf who used to be a secret agent, who retired to Vermont and is now being forcibly unretired by the agency that he used to work for, which, is the oldest trope in the spy novel genre, but it's an oldie and a goodie, and I really love it. And so that's how the series starts off.
And Shane, I know you've got a couple.
Yeah, I should have thought about this before I started talking. Once Upon a Wish is a multi-author series called, it's part of a multi-author series called Home for the Holidays, which is romance. Mine is a second chance romance story about a baseball player who comes home for his old coach's retirement party. And of course, his ex-boyfriend is also the coach's son. It's a trope as old as time. They reconnect, work through their issues, and find their happily ever after, of course. And my other book, Try Me, is an Omegaverse book that takes place in college. It's an age gap romance. And it is also a multi-author series with my two writer best friends, Drea Roman and Abigail Cade. And all of the books cross over, and it's just so much fun to write because we've just created an entire new world for these characters to live in, and it's together, which is the first time I've ever really been involved in something that we created with me more than one other person for a book series, and it's great. It's called the Lakeview University series, The Trimester, and all the books have try in the title.
I love triangles. So let's talk a little bit more. Let's dive a little bit deeper in kind of the universes everybody's going to be stepping into, kind of what things are going to be like. not necessarily too much in the characters yet, but I mean, what's kind of the universe everybody's going to get out of this? So, Rachel, I'm going to start with you on that one.
It's a universe that looks very suspiciously much like our own. It's in this universe, there are creatures like werewolves. Magic does exist, but it's not something that is visible to, your normal or mundane human beings. And the idea is that Rick used to belong to a pack that kept their nose to the ground. They were very, very under the radar and did not get involved in such things as mundane politics or join the army to serve their country, which is a little bit of backstory, exactly what he did, and then got disowned from all of the other werewolves. So, like I said, it's a universe that looks very familiar, and it is a universe that draws on a lot on the history of that's happened in our normal universe. I tend to enjoy history. I tend to be a big history buff, and so a lot of the stuff that Rick has experienced has been stuff that I drew on from reading history, from watching and reading historical documents, watching documentaries, that sort of thing.
So, Shane, let's talk a little bit deeper about kind of the world everybody's going to be stepping into here.
Yeah, so I watch a lot of Hallmark movies this time of year. And when I think of writing holiday romances, kind of like the series that I wrote, the Point Pleasant Holiday series, it's very Hallmark-ish, right? It's kind of sweet with heat. I like the tropes, and Second Chance Romance is one of my favorites. So it is a small town in Kentucky, which is near a university that I like to use in some of my other books also, that I've called Moray University. And it is, it's kind of a story about, it's actually kind of timely when you really think about it, because you're always hearing about, when do you come out as LGBT when you're playing professional sports, right? And the whole impetus of this is that his ex-boyfriend didn't give him a chance. He left him because he had gotten signed to a professional baseball contract. So he left him, so that choice wasn't his any longer, because he was scared that if he did come out, which is what he wanted to do, that it would ruin his career, and in the end he would be blamed. So so that's kind of the world that we're living in, is what happens when his career is kind of nearing that end, and his choices are now his again, and after they reconnect, what he really decides to do. But it is very much a small town, very country redneck town in Kentucky that the book is set in. And Try Me is set in Vermont. It is a very liberal college. It is also a very liberal world where men can actually get pregnant. It is an impreg book, an impreg series, and it's what happens when you're at an elite school, but you fall in love. You're fated to fall in love with a fated mate story, where you fall in love with your professor, and the kind of the chaos that ensues from that, because the family already had ideas of who and what kind of person their son should marry. And it definitely was not a professor from Oklahoma. They're both very fun and, humorous. Like I tend to write, it has that Hallmark feel of that small town Christmas story. So
Michael, let's dive a little bit deeper into Big Trouble with Leaving All the Fish Behind.
Yeah. So the Wayman universe is basically what happens when the rich politicians from 10 physically antagonistic universes decide they want more luxuries, and they create Earth, or 11th World, which has generally been considered the worst waste of magic and technology ever devised by any committee anywhere. The primary universe for Earth is actually set in 1984. The crossways are basically interdimensional tunnels between the universes, Earth being hypoallergenic to those 10, since it was designed that way. The fun part about it, for me, of course, is that it actually stitches through 4 of my other book universes, in addition to the others that fill out the 10. And it's science fantasy, because some of the worlds have magic and some of the worlds have tech. And it was one of the first times that I took my mentor's advice and just really cut loose and had fun without really worrying too much about what people were going to think about it. It's bad jokes and misplaced quotes and tropes turned sideways and polka dotted. It's just a lot of fun.
So let's dive a little bit deeper into who we're going to be hanging out with in these various stories. So Shane, I'm going to hit you up first.
Okay. So Try Me is a story about classes, and Darren, the student, comes from a very upper class family in Vermont, where who you are seen with, what you do, what your profession is, what restaurant you go to all matters, right? Like, we all know those people. And Thomas is one of those artists that gave up on himself fairly early on, because he couldn't handle not having that security. So he became a kind of fell into being a professor. He does have his master's, so but it was in opera, and he becomes a voice teacher at Lakeview University. And there's, the each one of them, understands what the science is between fate and a fated relationship, but that doesn't mean that they jump into it willingly. I find it interesting that the younger person handles it much easier than the older person does, which I think is kind of realistic in society today, right? That the older person holds out because he really doesn't want to be holding back the dreams and ambitions of this other person, because he knows how it felt giving up on his own. And in some ways, Once Upon a Time, a book I didn't write, Once Upon a Wish, has a similar feeling to it, because it, once again, the characters were at odds over the choices that each other made. My baseball player is coming to terms with his career being over with a shoulder injury at a fairly young age. And he's kind of become the face of the team, and coming back home, which he hasn't done in quite some time, he's surprised to find Kenny, who is his ex-boyfriend, back teaching at their old school. And their relationship develops again, mainly because that they're able to start working through the past, but Kenny has a harder time getting over it than Jax does, the baseball player, which is funny, because it really is Kenny's fault for taking a choice away from somebody else about whether or not they're going to reveal who they really are. And yeah, that's my characters, and I'll stick to that.
Michael, let's talk a little bit, dive a little bit deeper. Who are we going to be hanging out with in the new series?
Okay, so the main character is Sam Bridger, but it is definitely an ensemble story. Sam is a good-hearted buffoon when it comes down to it. He is very much a Jack Burton style character for Big Trouble. He talks about himself in the third person. He is just bigger than life in his opinion, at very least. And is a funny, clumsy idiot for everybody else. He picks up a hitchhiking grandma Minotaur who's smuggling weapons of mass destruction. He gets abducted by a desert princess. He gets hit across the back of the head with a clownfish. Gets hitchhiked upon by a wizard with a Frank Sinatra fetish, and is being audited by a dwarven cyborg that has a bad habit of demolishing things for no particular reason.
It sounds like
Sam,
my junior year of college.
Yeah, it's a lot of crazy. I mean, of course, since they don't ever tell Sam that the world is about to be destroyed, he doesn't. He busies himself saving everyone and everything except the world. Like I said, it's a wild ride. It's the Mad Hatter on steroids to a large degree.
All right, Rachel. So who are we going to be really hanging out with?
So, like I said, my main character's name is Rick, and he is a German werewolf who's about 200 some odd years old. He left his pack to become part of this new thing called Germany, when it became a country. And he ended up joining the army looking for, his life is basically a series of trying to find another pack in which he can fit in. And that search has led him to join the German army, to then desert the German army, to fight with partisans in Eastern Europe in post-World War II era, to joining a offshoot of what used to be the strategic Office of Strategic Services, and then leaving that when it was clear that it was not a good substitute for family or pack. So he's a guy who's looking for people to trust and believe in, and to fight for something that's not just empty words. He's looking for something that he can really truly believe in and be part of. And he's put onto a team with two other people, one of which is an ex-NYPD cop, the other one of which is a former PSYOP officer. And they're the two of them each have their own issues. The cop, John Tell, is kind of a jerk. I mean, that's his thing, is he's a jerk through most of the book. Rick is as well. The two of them are a little bit too similar to each other to actually ever really get on, if you know what I mean. And then Karen, Dr. Karen Willett, is the former Army PSYOP officer, and for her, service is a family legacy. So she's come to this agency because her grandmother served, her uncle served. It's like a lot of soldiers, service to country is a family legacy. So the three of them get put together on a team and sent off to do this mission that they apparently need Rick Keller for, even though he's been out of the game for 10 years in Vermont and quite rusty at pretty much everything.
So kind of, if I'm picking up the book, here's one of the fun questions: is what inspired these stories? Because it's always a matter of, we've always got plenty of ideas. The question is, why do we wind up latching on to this one to be the next thing we work on and write, right? So, Michael, for you, what was it that inspired you that pushed this one over the edge to be the one where you had to embrace the crazy?
Well, I mean, to a large extent, Big Trouble in Little China. It was one of those times when I'm just rolling through my movie collection and doing old classics. And then I was asking myself, well, what would happen if Jack Burton were turned up to 11? What if he were made bigger? And what if there was a world, or what if Earth was a world that was essentially the crossroads between multiple book universes where truckers are moving cargo for a bunch of effete snobs, and nothing went right. Big Trouble meets Hitchhikers meets Looney Tunes it was a lot of crazy in my head.
Rachel?
I think that I was I was part of a writing group when I was stationed at Fort Hood, and one of the things that we did was a critique of exercises that we did out of a book called Naming the World. And at one point, one or two of the exercises just started to center around this character, this universe, and between the reading that I was doing in history at the time, I was doing a lot of counterinsurgency and partisan history professional reading because I was on active duty at the time. And all of this started to come together with my love of any sort of urban fantasy. And I think I had at one point read a book called The President's Vampire. And it was similar lines of every president learns that they have a direct line to this vampire who's sworn to service. And it was, I really enjoyed that book. And I started thinking about, wouldn't it be really cool to have more supernatural creatures? And this was in, I think, 2010, 2011 time period. And then in 2014, in 2011, I was doing NaNoWriMo with a friend of mine, and this just happened to be the story that I picked because there was a lot that I could just kind of draw on, and ended up I would go running in Missouri in the winter, and it was very cold. And then I'd come inside and I'd sit down and I'd write about a werewolf running through the wilderness in the snow. And it all just kind of worked out that way.
Shane, how about for you?
Well, both of these are multi-author things. And Home for the Holidays, my friend Morgan Mason asked if I wanted to be involved. One of the things I was given was the title has to have wish in the title. When I write romance, I usually think about writing it from kind of that Hallmark-ish perspective, with tropes kind of leading me in the direction that I want to go in, and then finding the characters and all of that. But the reason I did that book was because I was asked to be a part of the series. Try Me is kind of similar, but in a different way. My friend Abigail Cade bought a collection of covers, and she contacted me and Drea and asked if we would each want a cover and write a 3-book series based on these covers. I think they were called Dorky Professor covers. Like, that was literally, I think, what they were called. And they each had like the word dork professor in the fake title that it was on, and they were really cute. Just to work with the two of them and do it together was something I wanted to do. And I knew that the three of us would create something, kind of fun and unique, and just working with them was kind of the joy of doing it. And all of our books kind of came out from a year of conversations that we had about the world and characters and how they were going to interact and what was going to cross over in books and that kind of stuff. So it was a lot of fun to write because I was writing with my best friends. So
we're going to go with one of those things that is a time-honored and true and fun question. Is, as being writers, it's always fun to see what rabbit holes we fall down. Sometimes it's what did I learn? What did I do? What did I discover as a part of the process? Because every time we do something, there's always at least 27 things that we're going to fall across. So, Rachel, what did you learn, discover? What fun things did you come across? What, since you were reading about the light and airy, periods of spy and intelligence, and, killing a lot of people, what did you learn and discover in this process?
So I learned that I really like using the word fuck a whole lot. And I learned this because I will often have Microsoft Word read things out loud to me, just to kind of get into the process of the day to get started writing. And one day I'm sitting there listening to a scene and I was like, oh my, it's a lot of F-bombs. But seriously, I actually learned a lot of, I learned that history definitely rhymes. And as I was writing my thesis novel, which is not in this particular series, but is a lot of the historical underpinnings are the same. I just realized that there's not really any sort of getting away from human nature. The things that we did 100 years ago are still affecting the things that are happening today. And so that has very much influenced not just this book, but the rest of the books in the series that are either written or currently underway.
How about you, Shane? What rabbit hole did you fall down? What'd you learn? What'd you discover in this one, in working on these?
I mean, I discovered I really like writing redneck romance. No, I had to learn a little bit about baseball. I'm a softball player. I sucked in Little League. I never played, baseball in high school. I played softball, very similar, of course, but there were some things I actually had to learn. I had to learn a lot about the anatomy of a shoulder. And if you ever start watching videos of surgeries and healing and that kind of stuff, I kind of got into all of that. And I also had to learn a lot about childbirth, a little bit more than I wanted to know. For Try Me, gay for a reason, was not. Women are amazing. But yeah, that was kind of the rabbit holes I fell down for these books a little bit. Normally it's murder and blood spots, so this was a nice change for me. So
I'm just gonna behave on that one. Michael, what'd you learn on this one? What rabbit hole did you trip down this time?
I learned that humor is hard. It's hard to be funny because it's so subjective. Even using 1984 and all the pop culture I could possibly throw in there. Being amusing without being offensive is really kind of a fine line. And by the time I was done with the novel, and I have to say that this novel was actually finished originally in 2008, 2009. I was convinced that this was a one-of-a-kind thing, even with as much fun as I had with it, that I would never be able to pull this off again. I was like totally exhausted from trying to be amusing. And then, of course, after we got the publishing contract on it, and they started telling me, hey, you need to do this anthology, you need to do that anthology, I realized there were more stories. There was more funny, and that if I'd been taking myself so very, very seriously as a corporate professional day job type of person all the time, that really letting myself go was cleansing, but still very, very difficult. It was, I guess it was also the initial groundwork for being out in public as an author, because it was way before I got published the first time. And my mentor kept telling me that I needed to lose the corporate shell and be the person, be the weirdo I really was, down deep. So little bit of personal journey, a little bit of darn, Robert Asprin and Douglas Adams make this look easy, and it isn't. So,
well, guys, we've got everybody stacked up and ready to pile up those to be read piles. But before we get out of here, let's make sure they know where to find them, where to find you guys, website, social media, and of course, these books. So, Shane, I'm even going to let you go first.
Well, that's so exciting, Jim. ShaneKMorton.com, my website. On Facebook, I have a really vibrant readers group called Shane's Sweet and Salty Readers. And on Instagram and the Talkity Tick, I am at Shane Morton Author. And I am now dead on Twitter. So,
Rachel?
So my website, which was reserved when I didn't really know what I was doing, is infamous-scribbler.com. And yes, and my Facebook is Rachel A. Brune. My Instagram is at Rachel A. Brune. And those are pretty much the places that you'll be able to find me. You can find my books on Amazon. Cold Run is available on Kindle and Kindle Unlimited.
And of course, CroneGirlsPress.com. I can't even say it today.
That's okay. I call it CGP for a reason.
And Michael.
Well, I'm over here laughing at Rachel a little bit, mostly together, because you can find all my social media and a link to our burgeoning Discord community at www.deliriousscribbles.com. So we're kind of cousins on our websites. As for the books, Sleigh Bells Ring came out from Bayonet Press. It came from the Trailer Park 2, and Wayman Chronicles 1 Crossways came out from Three Ravens Publishing. I know that Crossways is Amazon exclusive at this point, both Kindle and Kindle Unlimited, but I think both the anthologies are actually wide.
And I've had the pleasure of being your host this evening, Jim Nettles. You can find me at jamespnettles.com, authoressentials.net, authoressentialsworkshops.com, the speculative-fiction-academy.com, creatingprose.com, and of course here at ConTinual. And we will see everyone again soon. Go stack up those to-be-read piles.